Everyone, welcome you all. In our previous video, we have seen how we can set up a Springboard project in Eclipse as well as in IntelliJ IDE. So in the today's video, we're going to see how we can create a basic REST service to handle HTTP get, post, put, and delete requests. So before watching this video, you need to have some basic understanding of what is REST API and what are the different type of HTTP requests we can send through REST API. So there's a basic understanding you need to have. So then you can understand this concept. So now let us start creating a REST API service and which will handle get, post, put, and delete requests. So let's go to the Eclipse, and in the Eclipse, let me just create a new Springboard project. So how we can create a new Springboard project? We need to go to the file and the new other, and here we have to select the Springboard. And inside this, we have something called Spring Starter project, and click on the next. And here, this is a service URL. From here, we will get all the Springboard dependencies. And here we have to provide some project name. So here I'm giving some project name called Springboard REST Service Project. And this is going to save inside my workspace. And type is Maven project I'm taking, jar file. And Java is a language and Java version is 8. And if you want to give some group ID, so I'm just giving group ID as com.rest service. And artifact is, I'll say demo, and description. And if you want to give some package name, you can say com.restservice.demo. So this is a name of the package. Now click on the next. So once you click on the next, here we need to select the dependencies which are required for your project. So mainly we have to see Spring Web. So this will provide you to develop the REST API services. Select this Spring Web and then click on the finish. So once we have done this, which is created a new Springboard project and which is basically a Maven project. If I just expand this project in the pom.xml, you can see all the dependencies by default added. Now let's refresh the project once again. If there are any missing dependencies, which will automatically download. So go to Maven and update project. All right, so once we created our project, so which is created different type of packages and folders. If I just look at here, src main Java, which is for development, src main resources. If you need any resources files to develop, we can maintain all the resources inside this package. And src test Java, inside this we are going to write a unit test cases to verify the or to test the APIs. Okay, now let us go and expand this folder. So src main Java, and inside this there is a default package which is already created. If I just expand this, this is the actual class, or we can say main class. So Springboard REST Service Project application. So the whole project will be maintained from this particular class. So if you want to execute the whole project, we have to start execution from this main method, which is having main method. Okay, so for now we are not going to write anything on this. So let's keep this class aside. So we are going to develop a REST API service which we can handle like get request, put request, post request, and so on. So let us develop a small REST service API. So for that, what you have to do is we have to create something called a controller class. So in Springboard, we have to create something called a controller class. So for example, you have some kind of APIs like this to design. So for example, let me just have some APIs here. Okay, now let me just take 3 sample APIs. Okay, so here, so get all the users, get, and if you send this particular URL, so which will return all the users which are present in the database. Similarly, if you want to get the specific user details, we can pass the URL along with the user ID. So this is a sample HTTP URL. When I send this URL, we'll get some response, right? So suppose here I'm talking about only users. Similarly, whatever the API services you are going to develop for like students or customers or users, you will create a separate classes, which is called as a controller class. So here I'm going to develop, or I'm going to create REST services for users. So for that, I'm going to create one uh, controller class. So here in the same in the same package, in the whichever package we have a main class, in the same package, I'm going to create a new class called, I'll name it as users controller. Okay, suppose tomorrow if you want to develop a student specific APIs, then you can create one more controller class, like you can name it as a student controller. So here I say users controller. So I'll say finish. Now currently this class is empty. I don't have anything in this. So what we have to do is, as soon as you send a request or API service request, immediately this class should be invoked. So the user controller class should be invoked. Okay, so because we are triggering the user API services. So suppose tomorrow if you have created student APIs, and if you trigger the student APIs, then there is one more controller class we have to create for students controller, and that class will be automatically invoked. So whatever class we created here, user controller, I want to invoke this class immediately as soon as I send the API request. It can be get, put, post, whatever it is. So as soon as you send some request, this particular class I want to invoke. So for that, we need to add one annotation to this class that is called as REST controller @REST controller. Okay. So we need to import this class from Springboard. So what exactly this annotation will do is, this annotation is make sure like this particular class works with the RESTful services. Whenever you send a specific RESTful service, and this class automatically trigger. So for that we need to specify @REST controller. Okay, first option. Now the second option. So whenever you send some request, till here this is just like a URL, and this is a endpoint, or this is the actual resource from the web we will get the data. And if I just look at here, the users / user ID. So this is the users is a resource, and this is a one parameter, or we can say path parameter. Okay. So whenever you send this URL with this particular resource, we have to map this controller class. Okay. So for that, we need to add one more annotation called request mapping. We have to add one more annotation called request mapping. But what is a request mapping here? So whenever you send this particular URL along with this resource, then this user's controller should be activated. So we have to specify this resource exactly in the double quotations here. Okay. So when you specify this, what happens? Whenever you send a request with this resource, immediately this class will be triggered. Okay. So now we need to import this request mapping also. These are the two mandatory annotations which we need to add to the controller class. All right. So the first parameter REST controller says this particular class works for RESTful services. Whatever services we are sending, so this class automatically invoke. And what is request mapping means, based upon the resource, what type of resource we are sending, accordingly this particular controller will be invoked. Suppose I have multiple control classes. Suppose tomorrow I have developed suppose I have multiple type of web services, let's say related to users, related to students, okay, and related to employees. I'll develop multiple APIs for different type of people. So for each kind of category, we can create a different controller classes. And here I will name it as /users, and some other controller class I will specify /employees, or some other controller class I will specify /customers, like that. So depends on the resource what we are sending. Accordingly, the particular controller class will automatically trigger. So you can have multiple controller classes for multiple type of APIs. Okay, so these are the two mandatory annotations which we need to add at the beginning. And now what we need to do is we have to develop certain number of methods. Suppose when I send some request, get request. So what is the method should be triggered? When I send the put request, then what is the method should be triggered? So those methods we have to implement. So let me just write one method here. I'll say public string, and I'm writing one method called get users. Okay, so public string get users. So what exactly this method will do is, let us find this method. Okay, so get users. So this is a method I have created. So whenever you send this request, http localhost 8080 users, so I want to list all the users which are available. Okay, so that is a response that particular method should return. So when this method should trigger, whenever you send this URL, this particular method should be triggered. So in this controller class, we can have any number of methods, depends upon the type of request. So when you send the get request with this resource, I want to execute this method. But if you have multiple methods, how this class will know which method we need to trigger? it doesn't know. So we have to redirect. For that, we need to use one more annotation for the method, that is get mapping. Get mapping. So here there are different type of mappings are there. If it is a get request, we have to use get mapping, which we have to import. Or if it is a put request, then we have to use put mapping. Or if it is a delete request, then we have to say delete mapping. So whatever type of request we are sending, the type of mapping annotation we have to specify for that particular method. So now what happens is, whenever you send this particular request, it will check the resource users, which is exactly matching here, and it will come inside this method. And what type of request it is? Get type of request. So the get mapping method will be executed. So inside this method, we have to actually write the code. When you send this request, what kind of output it should return, what kind of response it should return. So that code we have to include inside this method. So for now, I'm just writing a simple message. I say in the return, I'll say http. Okay, so get request was sent. Okay, so I'm just writing a simple message for now. So when this method will be triggered, so as soon as you send this URL as a get request, so then this method will be triggered. So get mapping. Similarly, we can create multiple methods, and we have 4 different type of requests. This is for get mapping, and here I'll create for uh, post mapping, and this is for put mapping. Okay, and here this is for delete mapping. Okay, so for 4 different type of requests, I'm creating 4 different type of methods. So here when you call this get mapping, let's say get users, this particular method will be triggered, and which will return the statement. And suppose when you send this URL with the post request, when I send the same URL with the post request, what you have to do? We have to create a new user. So let me just create a method. So here instead of get users, I'll say create user. Instead of doing this, I'll say create user and HTTP. And this is a post request was sent. I'm just changing the body, and we have to import this post mapping. And similarly, other mappings annotations also we have to import. So these are all uppercase character. Put mapping. So import this put mapping, import this delete mapping. Okay, now let me change the body also. Here this method is for get request, and this is a method for post request. And here this is put request. So I'll say update user. I'll name it as update user. So this method will be triggered whenever you send a put request. So this is for put request was sent, and this is the method which will trigger whenever you send a delete request. So here I'll name it as a delete user, and this is our delete request. So now I created a 4 different type of methods for 4 different type of request. So if I just look at this URL, so till here this is a Tomcat server. Okay, and in the server our API is running. So this is a resource. Users is a resource basically from the server. So and when you run this API, when I send this URL, what happens is, so this particular controller class will be triggered, and what type of request we are sending, corresponding method will be triggered from this class. So if you send a get request, the first method will execute because the mapping is get here. And if I send a post request, the second method will execute. If I send a put request, then third method. When you send a delete request, then delete method will be triggered. So this is a basic class which we have created, and which is basically called as a controller class. Okay, so far what we have done is we have just created a Springboard project, and we are not touching anything on the main class. When you run this main class, what happens, which will automatically start your Tomcat server, and your API will be up and running. Now just we created only one class, which is user controller, and here we specify different type of methods for different type of request. And for controller classes, we have to add these 2 annotations: request rest controller and request mapping. Okay, so now let us try to execute the class. So when I run as Springboard app, now it will start running our Springboard project. All right, so now it is started. So once it is started, let us check whether this request is working fine or not. So by default, Tomcat server will run on localhost 8080 port number. When you send this resource or when you send this path along with this URL, or we can also call it as an endpoint, so which will trigger particular method, depends upon your request. So to test this API request, I'm using my Postman tool. So Postman is a good tool by which we can verify the API. So we can send the request and we can get the response and we can verify the responses. So this is my Postman tool and I'm sending the request now. So what type of request I'm sending? Get request and paste this URL. So till here, this is just a URL and actual users is a actual path. Okay. So when you click on send, so what kind of request I'm sending? I'm sending the get request. So as soon as you executed this, as send your request, now you can see the response. So what is the response you got it here? HTTP get request was sent. So if I just look at the code once again, so which method is called from the user controller? So this is called the first method because we have just sent slash users. So get users method is called because we send a get request. And suppose I'm changing the request. Now this time I'm passing the post request. The URL is same, but I'm saying the post request. Click on the send. So now we can see this is the response we got from the method. HTTP post request was sent. So that means what? This particular method is executed. So similarly, let us test put request. And now we'll get the HTTP put request was sent. This is the actual response from the API. Now let us see delete request. Click on the send. So now we got the delete response. So what we have understood so far is we are able to uh, develop a Springboard project, and we have developed or we have implemented a simple REST API service, which is users. And we have created some basic methods, and accordingly, whatever the type of request we send, like get, put, delete, or update, so corresponding methods will be triggered here. Okay, this is the basic project which we have created. So sometimes your request is also having something called query parameters or path parameters. But in those cases, how get method will trigger, how get method will execute. Okay, so that we will see now. So the next step is, so let us say take this URL now. So this is also get request. So here when you send this request, let us assume this is displaying all the users from the database. But currently we are not configured with any databases. Just we are testing the plain stuff. Like we are understanding the basic stuff from the Springboard project, how we need to develop the REST APIs. Okay, so later on I will show you how we can connect to the databases, how we can fetch the data, and all these things, right? So here let us take the another URL. So what is the difference between this one and this one? So in the second URL, so the users is a path variable, user ID is a parameter. This is a path parameter, we can say path parameter. Under users I need to pass the user ID. So what this will return as per the requirement, let us say this particular thing will return the user details, like user ID. Whatever user ID passing, it will display the user ID in the response. Okay, now let us see how we can change the method according to this particular request. So what I will do is I'll just take another copy of this method because this is also get request. Okay, let's take another copy of this method, and I will just name it as get user. Instead of get users, I say get user. Okay, so this particular method should get a single user. And if I just look at the URL, so we are passing the user, so which will anyway which is passed here, which is matches here. But what extra we are passing, that user ID, which is a path parameter we are passing. So this we need to handle. So for that, what I have to do is in this particular method, we have to specify something in this annotation, that is path, because we are passing the path variable. So path equal to, okay, so path equal to, let me just close it. Okay, so path equal to in the double quotations. So till slash users, we'll get it from here. After users, what is the path parameter we have to pass? Slash user ID. This is the one, right? So what we have to do now here, okay, path equal to in the double quotations, we have to say slash in the curly braces, specify that is user ID. This is just a variable. Okay, so whatever the user ID we are passing here, let's say 1 2 3 whatever, that value captured by this user ID path. And now the value we need to store in some variable. So here in the method itself, we have to define something called path variable at the rate path variable. Okay, I say at the rate path variable. It is a case sensitive. Okay, path variable. And what is the type of this variable? The type of this variable is string, right? So I'll say string and user ID. This is just a variable name. So if the URL contains a path variable like this, we have to capture it into this method by specifying a variable called path equal to slash user ID, because till here slash users we got it endpoint, continuation this one slash user ID we are passing. So whatever user ID we are passing here from the URL will be captured by this and store that user ID in this variable. So this string type of parameter. So additionally we have to specify something called at the rate path variable. So we have to import this path variable. And now we got the user ID inside this method. So when you send this request, this particular method will be triggered, which will capture the user ID. So now here I'm just changing the message. So here I'm saying HTTP get request was sent for user ID, sent for user ID. What is that user ID? I'm just appending this user ID here. This is a response you will get when you send this particular request, So this is how we need to implement this method. So when you send this normal URL, so slash users, the first get method will execute because it's not taking any arguments, just only resource it is taking. But when you pass the user ID, what happens? This second method will be triggered because here we are taking the user ID as an argument. And don't forget, we have to specify at the rate path variable. And this user ID I can use internally inside your code. Okay, now we have implemented this method, which is basically path parameter. Here user ID is a path parameter. So now let us run our project and right click, run as Springboard app. So once you start your application, your Springboard Tomcat server will start, and then go back to the Postman tool. Now previously when I send only users, oh, you got this, right? Let me just send a get request. So you got this message when you send only users, but this time I'm also passing the user ID slash, let me just pass 100. So some random number. So whatever user ID we are passing, that will be captured by the method, and the same user ID will be displayed on the response window. So let me just click on send. Now you can observe here, this is a response. HTTP get request was sent for user ID 100. So whatever user ID we are passing, the same user ID is displayed as part of the response. So this is how we can write a separate method to handle the path parameter. If it is a path parameter, we have to handle like this. And sometimes you may have query parameter. So here, this is the path parameter. Okay, so sometimes you have a query parameter. So in those cases, how we can handle query parameter. So for example, so let me just give one more URL like this. So this is also get request, but here get all the users in specific page. Let us say I have 100 users in my database. I don't want to get all 100 users. I want to get users which are present in only first page. Again, in the first page, I have 100 users. So among 100 users, I want to print only 50 users on the first page. Okay, so I can apply the filter on the URL. So now if I just look at this URL, so till here, this is a URL and users is a resource. And after question mark, whatever is there here, this is called as a query parameter. And basically the query parameter filter the data. So here I'm passing two parameters. What are those? Page equal to 1, first page, this is one parameter, and limit equal to 50. This is another parameter. So I'm passing two query parameters here. So basically which will filter the data, whatever data which is sent by this particular URL. So page equal to 1 is one parameter, limit equal to 50 is another parameter. So now we need to handle this query parameter through our method. So how we can handle this? Now go back to the Eclipse. Now I'll show you. So this particular method will take only one path parameter. This is not a query parameter. So this is responsible for that. And we have this method get users. What this method will do, when you pass this URL till users, which will display all the users. So this particular method will be triggered. But now what I have to do, suppose when you pass this filters or when you pass this query parameters, so then how this method is going to handle. Okay, so for that what you have to do is these parameters we have to receive inside this method, inside this get users method. How to receive those parameters? Slightly we have to modify this method. So to modify this method, what we have to do is we have to say something called request param. So two parameters we are passing from the URL. One is a page, one is a limit. So we have to write two annotations here. So what are those annotations? At the rate inside the method path request param. It is a not path parameter, it's a request parameter. So it should be request param. And here we have to specify what is the first request parameter, page, second parameter limit. So page is the first request parameter. So here we have to specify the value is page. So page. And what is the value of the page here? Integer a page. So what exactly this is representing is request param. So this annotation we have to import because we are passing the request parameter, which is query parameter. And what is the value of the query parameter? Page. Page means if I just look at here, this is a page, the keyword, and limit is also keyword. So here the value is page, and whatever value we have in this page, which is 1, which is integer, right? So that we need to capture into a variable. So here we have to create an integer variable, int page number, or you can create anything. So I'll say page number. Okay, so this is one parameter. Till here, one request parameter. Now copy the same. We need to specify the second parameter also, comma, again request parameter, value is limit, and this 50 we have to capture in the one more variable. So here I'll create one more variable. So I'll say limit. Okay, so I can say limit. You can give any number. Let's say limit number, whatever. Okay, so now we capture the two parameters. This is the first parameter, first query parameter. There's a second query parameter. Now we can use these parameters. So the values will be captured into these two variables, and we can refer these two variables inside our method. So what I will do is here, return get request was sent, and here I will update this for send for which page. I'll define the page. What is that page? Here I'm concatenating the page number concatenation, and limit is concatenation. I'm printing the limit number. So page number and limit number. So whatever the query parameter values we are capturing into this method, I'm using them inside your method. So later we will do a lot of things by using these parameters. Okay, for now I'm just printing a simple message. So like this, we have to modify this method. If you pass any query parameters, we have to write method like this. So how many parameters you are passing inside this query parameter? So those many number of arguments or parameters we have to specify inside the method. So this is a first argument and this is a second argument. Now I'm using this page number or limit number inside our code. This is the response actually we will send. So now save the file and I'll stop the server. So whenever you start your Springboard project, your Tomcat server keep on running. So whenever you do some modifications, so stop the server here and it will stop it, and then rerun your main class. Go to the main class and then run as Springboard app. So now let us test this URL now. So this particular URL, go back to the Postman, and here I'm changing the request. This is also get request. Now I'm passing page number is 1, limit equal to 50. Now click on the send. So now we can see in the response, exactly you can see the page number and limit is 50. And let's say page number 5, let's say limit is 100. Click on the send. So now you can see page number 5 and the limit is 100. So this is how we can create methods according to your request. So what we have seen here, how we can pass normal request with a single resource. And if you want to capture specific resource, or like if you want to pass path parameter, how we can write a method. And if you want to pass a query parameter, so this is the example for query parameter. Query parameters especially used for filtering the data. So when you send this request, which will get the page number and limit as an arguments inside this method, inside the user controller, and accordingly we can use those page number and limit inside this method. Okay, so this is how we can simply create a REST API, and which can handle get request and post request, put request, and then delete request. So in the coming upcoming videos, I will show you a more detailed way. So we'll see different type of scenarios, and also we will see how we interact with the database and how we can fetch the data and how exactly we'll return the response. So if you go for the complex APIs, we will see the response in the JSON format with the different type of fields. So how we can frame that response, how we can return that response, all those things we will see in the upcoming videos. So with this, we understood the basic stuff like how we can create a Springboard project, how we can create a controller class, and how we can develop a simple or very basic REST API services. Okay, so if you want to test these services, you can use any tool, not only the Postman. And if you send this URL, if you send this URL simply in the browser also, you will get the response. So you can just go to the browser and place that URL. So same message or same response you will get in the browser. Okay. So this is a basic understanding. In the next videos, we will discuss a few more things. So that's all for this video, guys. Thanks for watching.